Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you the top 10 best Ark PvE tames, so let's get straight into it. In at number 10 we've got the Stegosaurus, and come on, this is one of those creatures where it's like, oh my god, this is such a great one for PvE, and it is actually pretty good for PvP as well, with obviously all of its turret soaking abilities, but well, we talked about that today. It's a PvE list, not a PvP one, of course. With this thing, they're just a really well balanced berry gatherer, and yes, you could say trikes are really great as well, and parasols are really great, but I've never really liked them as much as the Stego, and actually this is the only berry gatherer that I've really decided to put on this list. There's one more, but it does a lot of other things apart from berry gathering, but you know, this is the only main berry gatherer I've actually put on the list today because it's not the biggest part of a PvE player's life, just gathering loads of berries up, but it really does help out a lot to have a creature that does berry gather, and the Stego is definitely one of those. The Theory I will also give a brief honourable mention here as well, as I think it deserves to be on the same spot as the Stego. The two gatherers you're going to want for like plant-based things are the Theory and the Stego. Yes, you can use the moss chops for organic poly and all of that, but the Theory is great at gathering fiber, like the moss chops as well, so you could give that a brief honourable mention, but I personally don't really like it as much as the Theory, and the Theory is very useful for the dragon boss fight on top of that too, so the Stego and the Theory are going to be the two creatures that are in at the number 10 spot today. Next up, we have got the Yuti, and I just really like this as a general creature for my PvE playing, not just obviously for the use in boss fights, which, you know, it is commonly what it is used for, and that's pretty much what everyone does use it for its courage roar in boss fights, and you'll bring a Daedon along as well, although that's not going to be on the list because I don't really think they are as important as the Yuti. The Yuti has a lot of advantage over it in my opinion because it just generally does a lot more, and if your creatures are strong enough you shouldn't need to heal them up anyway along the way. But I find this creature again is just a really good all-round general carnivore. You may also be surprised that you're not going to be finding the Rex on the list. I just find that there are better boss creatures out there than the Rex, and it's sort of been overtaken away. Even something like a Yuti, you could bring loads of Yutis into a boss fight, and a lot of you have been saying you find them a lot harder to tame than the Rex, and I would say that to some extent, especially considering the biome, but I've never really struggled with taming the Yutis at all, and I can get a nice high level breeding pair with relative ease, and then just breed tons of Yutis, and the Yuti army is there, because I would rather have an army of Yutis than an army of Rexes. The Crystal Wyvern I found is often just not talked about in a PvE just aspect or conversation in general, and the reason for that is probably because the map is slightly more obscure. Not everyone is out there on Crystal Isles, especially considering it's not in ASA, but these creatures really are, in my opinion, better than the normal generic wyverns, and people seem to talk about those all the time. I just prefer their elemental abilities, and they are far easier to tame, no questions asked. If someone says down in the comments below that these are harder to tame than a normal wyvern, you're wrong. I'm sorry. These are just so much easier. You only need to be level 60, and Note Run is ridiculously easy. You'll have no troubles doing that whatsoever. Then simply trap and knock out Crystal Wyvern to get that Primal Crystal, and then it's passive tame. Basic as just like that. And if you want to be really sure that you don't fall off, you can always have a grappling hook on you and just grapple onto it as well. But if you actually get into the right spot on its back, then you should be fine and you won't need one anyway. They just really are, in my opinion, a lot easier to tame than the Wyvern, and you get all of those Wyvern features, if not even better, considering the elemental abilities are better. My personal favourite is Blood Crystal Wyvern. Comment down below what your favourite Crystal Wyvern is. I've heard the Ember Crystal Wyvern is quite a favourite among many in the PvE community. In number 7, we have got the Shadowmane, and come on, this is just such a ability jam-packed creature from Gen 2. It deserves to be on the list, although not as high as some of the other creatures, as they've been around for a lot longer, and they also do spawn on some more accessible maps, are much easier to tame, and you know, there are other rationales and reasons for them being higher on the list, but the Shadowmane really does need to be on here. As well as a PvP player's dream, it is also a PvE player's dream. They are fast, quick, agile, and they can traverse huge distances over very short periods of time. Just look at how high this thing can jump. They also have the hydration buff, same as the Crystal Wyvern actually, although that's pretty useless why it has one, and they can utilize the pack buff on top of that as well, and go invisible too when both a male and female are present, and they're really great swimmers on top of that as well. You've just got so much versatility with a creature like this. It really is worth just getting one and using one. The only downside, of course, is the absolutely painful taming method, but I'm sure the benefits really do outweigh the negatives of said method. Now, I'm sure we all know the Desmodus, and it really is one of those creatures where, come on, you're going to be using it in a given PvE scenario as long as you've gone on field at some point and actually managed to tame one. They obviously use the same tame method as the Bloodstalker. Those blood bags are what you're going to need, and if you get a low level one first, which is definitely what I'd recommend with this, you're barely going to need any, really. Like if you're going for, like, I'm talking ridiculously low level, and then just farm loads of blood bags and get the high level which you've just been hoping for, and then maybe stash that lower level one in your base in case maybe you die out on an adventure and you need to get back on something. It's always nice to have some spare flyers. Obviously they have the glide ability, but their main use is Sanguine Elixir. 30% of your tames are done with a simple click of a button, and obviously their blood bag farms. They also can go invisible in the nighttime on top of this too, but I chose the wrong biome for this where there's no nighttime cycle, so I couldn't show that for the sake of today's video. Generally also they are great flyers with a lot of mobility on them, and they will get you everywhere that you're going to need to go. In at number 5 we've got the Argentavis, and this has really carried me through a lot of my Arc playing. The RG has always been there for me ever since right in the olden days when I started actually using these things, and I'm not sure with the chronology of abilities and when things were added, but nowadays they have a smithy as a saddle. They have a nice regen buff. They can carry 2 creatures at once because they can carry one in their beak and one in their claws, and they can carry a very wide variety of creatures on top of that too. Their weight reduction on metal, crystal and obsidian is just so well received. I really can't use it enough. Like, all of those metal runs I've done with the RG compared to something like a Pteranodon, it is just so much nicer to use. And obviously they do not have any kind of speed advantage compared to something like the Pteranodon, but I tend to actually turn on flyer speed leveling, but still, even at the base speed, they are very usable. But you know, I'm very much an advocate for flyer speed leveling, so I'll keep that there. But as always, the PvP players just taking it to the limits. I'm not just going to blame it all on you though, because PvE players did go a little bit mental, and it did make things a little bit more mental. But you know, at the end of the day, Arc's quite a mental game, so why don't we keep it a little bit mental? I guess, you know, cheaters and things like that. It's actually kind of sad, you know, all of the Arc cheating problems, but it sort of does happen with every game. A bit more extreme with this one though, considering the bugs are absolutely everywhere. But anyway, let's continue. Some people might get a little bit angry about my choice of Bloodstalker in at number 4. I simply love this thing for underwater travel, and traveling is a big part of my PvE playing. So from my preference of PvE playing, this is a very useful creature for me, and I sort of need one nowadays. Like, I'm just like, if I'm gonna go anywhere in the water or do any of those underwater caves, even if I'm on the island, I'm hopping straight over to Gen 1, getting a Bloodstalker and coming back with one before even stepping foot in the oceans to do those caves, or just generally traversing the oceans to go to underwater caves and things. I know Megalodons exist and I could do it with a Basilo quite easily, but sorry, I just love the Bloodstalker for underwater travel too much. It is so fast, it is so agile, you can see all the aggros of the creatures. It can also skate along the top of the water too, and that is just something which you really do miss if you're on some other creatures that are obviously underwater based ones, and I can't not have it at this point. You could say I've been a little bit spoilt with a creature like the Bloodstalker, because there are again a lot of other great ocean creatures out there, but I just simply don't use them anymore, and this is the only one that I use. It also actually deals a reasonable amount of damage, especially if you level it up too, and on top of that, the downsides to any underwater creatures are when you're out of the water, you can't use them anymore, whereas the Bloodstalker, you can keep using it as the water as well, and it is just a really fast, agile travel mount on top of that everything too, so you really can't undermine it for everything that's got going for it, because it really does have a heck of a lot going for it, and it's the same tame method as the Desmodus. If you get yourself a Desmodus too, then you can be pumping out Bloodstalker taming, and I just love taming and using these things as underwater mounts. In number 3, we've got the Baryonyx, and at the end of the day, this really is just the best PvE caving creature. You could argue the Shadowmane or something like that, but it is just so well known, and you know, it's on the island, so everyone really can just start using this thing straight away, and once you've got one, you're never really going to want to turn back. They are small, fast, agile carnivores, which can also jump as well. You know, if you want that Mario style dinosaur, they can actually have a spin attack on top of that in the water. So I guess Mario Galaxy, but the Baryonyx. I don't know why I'm referencing this, but let's continue on, I guess. They also have quite a hefty amount of damage for a carnivore this size, which obviously you would expect is going to make it a great caving creature. If you think of doing the artifact of the Skylords, don't bother taking one of these things. That cave is too small for pretty much every creature you'll find in the game. Possibly you could get a Saber in there if you really tried, but you'd have to use cryos in a lot of sections. It's simply not worth it. Do that cave on foot. You can see that spin attack there, the Super Mario Galaxy energy. And you can see it stuns creatures up to the size of a Megalodon. Don't try anything bigger than a Megalodon because it simply will not work. But you'll probably have the damage to take them out anyway. Either way, they're just really nice, small, agile, nimble, great, small carnivores. Don't know why I said small twice. They're really great for caving, and they're great for PvE. Then, at number 2, we have got the Maywing, and this creature is here because it is the epitome of travel. Yes, the Bloodstalker is my all-time favourite underwater mount, but this is just my all-time favourite travel mount, and it's actually not too bad of a swimmer as well. It can glide along top of the water as well. And I do maybe occasionally use this for short little dips, maybe out of my base if I'm building in the underwater caves on the island or something similar to that, or if I'm just briefly going through something and I can't be bothered to switch over my creature, because they are obviously the epitome, like I said, of flying creatures. They're not technically flyers, they're gliders, but still the speed and agility you can get with a creature like this over such long distances, no matter the gradient or elevation, is insane. And that's sort of where the rock drake falls behind a little bit, in my opinion. They don't work quite as well for just general or travel, and also they do spawn aberration as well, and they are, you know, a little bit harder to tame than the Maywing, considering this thing's saddle was unlocked at level 18. You can simply trank it out with a few tranks, and obviously just use some signs to trap it. It is such a cheap tame and so useful. They can also gather berries as well. This is the other berry gatherer, quote unquote, that is on the list. And obviously they're portable feeding trough too. You really do need these things for PvE if you're playing Ark Survival Evolved. If you're playing Ascended, tough luck. And in at number 1 is the Deinonychus. This always will top my lists for the best PvE Ark creatures, unless something comes out which is just so insanely small, nimble, yet insanely powerful that it manages to top this creature. But so far, still nothing has, and I'm confident nothing really will. They take no fall damage and have a lot of agility. On top of that, they can deal bleed damage to bosses, and as far as I'm concerned, they're the only creature that can do that, as they can grapple onto them and just absolutely tear them to shreds. They have the pack buff on top of those too, and although yes, they're not great in the water, that's not what I'm using these things for. I'm using these things for general travel and boss fights. And if you actually were wondering about the lack of boss fighting creatures on this list, it's because basically all of those fights can be done with the Deinonychus. I wouldn't really do the extinction boss fights with something like the Deinonychus, but that is such a minority in terms of the scale of all the Ark maps. I decided not to include any creatures that might be good for said boss fights, because for everything else really I can't think of any other exceptions apart from the Moda. Actually, maybe the Master Controller, you'll want something with a little bit more health, but still with some health mutations you can get through it on Alpha with absolute ease. Then they're the only scenarios where you probably wouldn't be using one of these creatures. But for everything else, they are just the perfect, the ideal, and nothing really does top them. On top of that, in the general world, they can scale up any kind of wall or vertical surface with absolute ease. You'll have no trouble traveling around the map with these things, and obviously they're so small and nimble and agile. They're not really going to get stuck on a lot of things too, which is generally nice. They are just the best PvE Ark creature. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you all did enjoy, as I definitely did enjoy making this one. As always, comment down below your favourite Ark PvE tame, and if you didn't agree with this, then you'll put your 10 in the comments below. Don't know what that was, and I'll see you all later.